Have you ever wondered what the best hairstyle is that was straight out of the 90s? Well, I'm here to tell you what it is: the mullet. The mullet was a very famous hairstyle, and I believe it was my job to inform you more about the mullet and its history. Today we will be talking about 6 main points that will walk you through the history of the mullet and some interesting facts about them. The first one will be the origin of the mullet. The birthplace is unknown and could have existed before man could draw or write. However, according to NorthStar.com, there are a lot of evidence that existed in many civilizations all the way from the Aztecs to the Vikings. One of the earliest examples is the Great Sphinx, which dates back 4,500 years. Even though the Sphinx has eroded, the mullet is still clear for all people to see. Notice the lack of hair in the front and the flowing hair in the back. Mullets were specifically banned from the Roman army because enemies found it easy to grab their hair and pull their heads back to slit their throats. Through the ages, many different advanced civilizations have been influenced by the mullet, including the Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, and Canadians. Now that we know some early history of the mullet, we can look at where it was most popular, which was the mullets in the 80s and 90s. The peak of the mullets was through the 80s, and pretty much everyone and their mom had one at the time. This was due to glam metal music, which was experiencing major mainstream success, which came with men with long hair, which the mullet was shaved out of. During the 90s, the Pittsburgh Penguins glamorized the mullet hairstyle, which was worn by many members of its team, including Jamar Jagger. In 1992, DC Comics publicized the mullet. In a Superman comic, where Superman dies and returns, where he's depicted with a mullet, and was drawn that way all the way until 1997. Many punk music bands and country music artists also rocked the mullet in the 80s and early 90s, including Billy Ray Cyrus, the Vandals, Travis Tritt, and Joe Diffie. Celebrities with mullet is a great transition into our next point, which is the top 5 greatest mullies of all time. This list was created by GenerallyInformed.com, who sent out surveys to thousands of people. Number 5 would be the cast of The Lost Boys. Number 4 is Chuck Norris, who I thought should be ranked way higher. Number 3 was Andre Agassi. Number 2 was Michael Bolton. And number 1 was Jackson Sedivy. Just kidding, it was actually MacGyver. You may be thinking that the mullet can only be worn one way, and you'd be wrong. That's what we're going to talk about next: different styles of mullies. There are more than 50 different ways to wear a mullet, and they all have individual names. But one thing that they all have in common is business in the front and party in the back. A good mullet can be created with any type of hair, curly or straight, long or short. A famous mullet that many people know and love is Joe Dirt's mullet, from the movie Joe Dirt. Most people have their mullets based off his because of how well known it is. Now that there are some people in this world that don't know anything and that think that the mullet is bad, and that's what we're going to talk about next, which is why people hate mullets. According to Newser.com, the main reason people hate the mullet is because of the things that it is associated with, like an unbuttoned shirt and chest hair, and they also just say it's because they don't like it because it's old. But last time I checked, your grandma's old and you don't hate her. Another reason the mullet is hated is because it's just not a normal haircut, and when people see something that isn't normal, they usually don't like it. I searched this question on Yahoo Answers, where I asked, why do people hate the mullet? And there was one answer, which was the first comment, and all it said was rednecks. Now that we've talked about the history of the mullet, let's get back to modern times, which is the mullet today. According to The Guardian, the mullet is back and it is alive and well. One big turning point for this comeback was a Netflix series called Stranger Things, where one of the characters named Billy rocked a dirty-ass mullet. The mullet was banned in Iran because it was called un-Islamic. But honestly, I think it was just all the freedom that was associated with it, and they couldn't handle it. I went to Sports Clips recently to get my mullet trimmed up. I asked the lady how often she gets people in there getting a mullet, and she said that she personally gives out 2 mullets every week, and she says she loves cutting them. So basically, 2020 is the year of the coronavirus, but we'll have a comeback year with 2021, which will be the year of the mullet. To remind you of what we went over, let's review. We talked about the origin of the mullet. We talked about the mullet in the 80s and 90s. We talked about the top 5 greatest mullets of all times. We talked about the different styles of mullets. And we also talked about why people hate mullets and mullets today. What it comes down to really is that the mullet is just a cool hairstyle, and it's been around for a really long time. Celebrities have worn them. Even though people may hate on them, they look really cool if they aren't exaggerated. The mullet is making a comeback, so I hope people better get used to them. I hope it can it may have hit its peak in the 80s and 90s, but I think that we can make it even bigger. Maybe you want to hear someone say to you, "Sick mullet, bro." Just go and get